how's it going? It is I again, your boy TJ, and today I want us to talk about an installment sale. This is one of my favorite ways of buying a property utilizing what is called an installment sale. A lot of people actually don't know what is an installment sale, but this is the longest, oldest professional way of buying properties in our market, and in some other market it is called the seller finance. So what is a seller finance? It is when the seller is selling the property and they become the bank, and this is what it's called. But for the purposes of this video here, we'll just refer to it as an installment sale. What is an installment sale? Let's talk about that. So number one, an installment sale is when someone else is selling their property, and out of that, someone else comes to buy it. So there's a buyer and a seller, right? So the seller then sells the property, but the buyer comes through and then they say, hey, I would like to buy this property, but can I pay it on installments, right? So there is a framework around such kind of a transaction. And you might be thinking, does this work in South Africa? Yes, it does. Actually, there is millions of installment sales that gets registered in our market. Or why would you want to do an installment sale? Well, there are so many reasons that we will uncover as we go along. But I'm hoping that at least the description that I've given you of what is an installment sale is you kind of like understand it. If you don't, well, continue listening, you will get the gist of it. I have utilized an installment sale many times. It is my favorite, and I like it because I am speaking directly to the seller and I can have conversations and I can negotiate my terms and conditions, and if they accept, they become my bank. So the seller becomes your bank. We all know that when you want to go and buy a property, generally you're going to put in an offer to purchase, and after that, the seller is going to say, well, maybe go to the bank, and then the bank is going to finance you. But this time round, the seller themselves are the bank. Well, there is a myth out there where people think that when the seller is now selling their property on an installment sale, they need to register for the NCA, National Credit Act. It is not true. It is a myth. If you go to an attorney and that attorney says that to you, then they don't know what an installment sale is. Go to a property attorney who will understand and will be able to give you the guidelines. All right. So how does it work? Right. So we've spoken about what it is, and we've spoken about who can utilize it. So basically it's two parties, a seller and a buyer. Right. And obviously a conveyancing attorney, an attorney needs to facilitate this transaction. Which is good. So I have read the installment sale, the framework, right? And I want to stipulate that there is no template of an installment sale, because already some of you are like, oh, TJ, maybe send us the installment sale template. There is no template for it. However, there is what they call a framework, right? So a framework is there, and it kind of like gives you the overview of how this thing should work. And basically, I have found out that each time I have done an installment sale, there's around about 3 things that are important that you need to look out for when you are doing an installment sale. So the framework is governed by 3 things. The first thing that I want to speak about is the time within an installment sale. So the time within the framework stipulates that an installment sale should not be less than 12 months. So 1 year. Right? Should not be less than 12 months and should not be more than 5 years. Should not be more than 5 years. All right? So which basically means that the timeline in which you can then engage a seller on, if you are the buyer, the time frame that you can engage here can be anything from 13 months to anything all the way to 5 years. Can you renew it? Well, this has been one of those controversial conversations. In my view, yes, you can. You can do what is called a back-to-back installment sale. So I can do 5 years. And if my things are not set up, I can go back and negotiate and I can do another 5 years. But the bottom line is that it will be now a new contract, right? Why do I say that I can renew it? Well, because it's a no contract, right? So I can. So that's the first thing. The second thing within the framework is that it is very clear within the timelines how many payments you should be making to the seller. In the framework, it does stipulates that it should not be less than 3 payments, right? It specifically says 2 payments in plus. So I'm kind of like taking the other one to qualify it, so which is 3 payments, right? So if it is 3 payments, not less than 2 payments, 3 payments. So 3 payments qualifies you, but not less than 2. That's what the framework says, right? So it means that you can do weekly payments, monthly payments, yearly payments, or you can literally do 3 payments, right? So you're buying the property and then today you put in a deposit. The next time you put in another payment is maybe halfway mark, or the last time that you're going to put the last payment is right at the end. Well, it is all now negotiable based on your seller. What is the seller willing to accept? These are all guidelines within the framework. If this is confusing, then maybe you want to go and see your nearest attorney. Yeah, someone who deals with properties all the time. The third thing that I then want to speak to is that an installment sale needs to be registered. It gets registered to protect yourself and to protect the investor. Now I'm talking about an investor. No, the seller and the buyer, right? You can see that as an investor, I like to always utilize the installment sale. So in this case, let us say there is a buyer and then there's a seller. So they negotiate the terms of payments and they negotiate how long it's going to take. But something that is non-negotiable is it has to be registered within the 3 months that it sets off. Why does it get registered? So that maybe if you do some improvements, so that maybe if the seller decides they're going to change their mind now, you as the buyer, you're protected. And so that if you, the buyer, are also out of line, the seller is protected. There is something that is written in black and white. So that's the framework of an installment sale. So when can you utilize an installment sale? There are many ways in which you can implement this. But I think the biggest problem that we have, especially in today's world where in our markets, a lot of the properties are actually bonded. They've got a bank on it. So can you utilize the installment sale? The big answer is yes. Right. Even though it might be difficult, because remember, when the seller is got a property and that property is in their name, especially when there's a bond, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is their property. They are just the custodian. On paper, they are the custodian. The real owner of the property is who? It is the bank, right? So in this case, when you are now doing an installment sale, it is not the person who is the seller who is whose name is paying the bond. They are not the real owner here. The real owner is the bank itself. So for that reason, who do you think needs to give consent of the installment sale? It is not the seller themselves. If there is a bond, it is the bank themselves that needs to put in the consent. So when you now go to your attorney, someone who deals with property, not a family attorney, not a what attorney, but someone who deals with property, the first thing that they're going to ask here is the property actually, does it have a bond? And if the answer is yes, they will actually want to go and knock on the bank, an ABSA, an FMB, a Capital Giving Home Loans. I don't know. I think they are. Yeah, they came out on the news the other day saying that they are giving out loans. Whoever, SA Home Loans, whoever it is, the attorney now needs to notify the bank and tell them that there is a change in contract here. There's a new buyer and this new buyer wants to do an installment sale on top of the seller whom they have a contract with. Depending on the bank, some banks will say yes, some banks will say no, some banks will say maybe, depending on the situation. If the bank says yay, it basically means that now you've got an installment sale. you can do whatever that you want to do. If it's moving in, if it is renovating the place, if it is putting in tenants, I don't know. But the bottom line is, this is how an installment sale works. We've got a course that we did at time on how an installment sale works. I've given you the high level and the framework of it. But when do you actually utilize it? There is so many ways in which you can do it. As a property investor, you may also want to just go and learn how you can utilize it and how do you take advantage of an installment sale. The course is literally it's a couple of hundreds. In the link below in the description, you should be able to see a link where you can go through and register that. I'm not here to educate, to give you, I'm not here to sell my course, but just in case you want to get the in-depth of an installment sale and you want to utilize it and you want to take it as a skill set on your property investment. I want to give you guys a property that I bought at one point in an installment sale. You're going to love this. So quickly, I'm going to give you some numbers. I bought this property for 700,000. So I went in to the seller and I said to Mr. Seller, hey, I want to buy your property for 700,000. They agreed with me, and then I said to them, I want to do an installment sale. And because I understood what an installment sale is, I said to them I was going to give them a deposit of 50,000 Rand, and they accepted that. So remember, how many payments do I need to make? A minimum of 3, right? And I said to them, I am going to start doing some renovation on this property. And when I did the renovation, when I finished doing the renovation, I'm going to give you the second payment, which they agreed, another 50,000. And I said to them that I am going to pay them after 13 months. This is when I'm going to pay them the rest of the money. So in short, I was now left with 600,000. But I got access to the property from day number 1 with just paying 50,000. And with my 50,000, I had access to the property. And over and above that, in round about 3 months to 4 months time, I was collecting rent on the same property for round about 50,000 because I had spent round about 400,000 to renovate the place. In total, I was now all in for 1.1 million Rand. However, this is what happened. At month number 11, after I was now collecting 40 grand every month, I went to my local bank and I said to Mr. Bank, this is my property that I am buying. Can you evaluate it for me? And the bank gave me a whopping evaluation of 2 million Rand. Okay. With that, I took part of that 2 million and I went to pay for my outstanding 600 to my seller. And that's how I utilize my installment sale. If this went over your head, definitely you want to attend that course that is available online for you. But if you got it, I hope that you can utilize this tool here in your next property. It is I, your boy, TJ. We'll see you on the next video.